I do a lot of AI engineering work, but I also do a lot of AI research work. So I'm both an engineer and a researcher. So I do read a ton of papers. And one of the ways that I've been using NotebookLM is to act as a research assistant to help me stay up to date with the AI research that I'm interested in. And I think this is a very interesting use case because NotebookLM can read sources and also understand PDF documents. At the end of the day, it's using Gemini 1.5 Pro, and I already used that model to do a lot of really complex analysis on research papers. I'm interested in using NotebookLM to help me stay up to date some of the latest developments around AI research concepts that I'm interested in. So in this section, I'm going to show you how I use NotebookLM as an AI research assistant. So the first thing I need to do is I need to create a new notebook. I'm going to create that here. And then I'm going to add my sources. This will be for every new notebook I create. It's always going to ask me to add sources. In fact, sources is a requirement for a notebook. You cannot really interact with the notebook or use the chat function or generate audio overviews if you don't have sources. The source I'm going to use in this demo is a PDF. Most of the papers come in a PDF format. So that's the format that I'm going to be using this time. So I'm going to choose File, and then I'm going to select my research paper. As someone that keeps track of prompt engineering techniques, I've been reading this paper called Meta Prompting, or I'm interested in reading it. And so I would love to use NotebookLM to help me get a better understanding of what this is. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to open it. And you can see that it's uploading, and it uploads really quickly. I can actually click on it, and you'll see that it has already uploaded this for me. And what I get here is a source guide. So I get the summary for it, and I also get key topics that are discussed in this paper. So that's really interesting, right? Because I can click on those and I can drill down into whatever topic I want. So let's do that as an example. So I'm going to click on, let's say something like reasoning tasks. And notice that it says discuss reasoning tasks. So those are pre-formatted chats that you can use, because when you click on it, it is submitted here as a prompt as part of this chat. And now I get a drill down on the reasoning tasks. So just in case you're lacking inspiration and you want to drill down into what this work is about, this particular research paper, you can literally just click on buttons and use those pre-formatted topics, questions, and even the guides that are available for you here in the notebook guide section. So I'm going to close this one. I'm going to name a notebook. That's something that you have to get used to. Maybe this changes in the future, but for now, you have to do this manually. Ideally, this should be automatic, but let's just add a name for it. I'm going to call this meta prompting and paper analysis. Okay, meta prompting. And I can do all the regular stuff. I can add notes. I can even add more sources here. This is something that we are going to be experimenting with in future demonstrations in this course. And now I can do a bunch of things with this particular research paper that I've uploaded. I can do the audio overview, but I'm actually going to leave this part for a specific section that I have coming later down the road in the course. So I'm going to skip this for now. But what I will do is I'm actually going to click on one of the suggested questions. I really like the suggested questions because they are pre-configured for you to start this exploration of whatever this research paper is about. I think this is a really powerful feature. So the one I'm going to select here is, let me see what makes more sense. All right, so it says, how does meta prompting differ from fuchsia prompting in terms of structure, application, and effectiveness in solving complex reasoning tasks? I think that's a very interesting one. And as a researcher, I want to know the difference. Maybe this gives me an idea on what meta prompting is all about and why so many people are excited about it and why people are talking about it. I'm going to click on that, and you can see that now it prompts the model here in the chat window. You can see the question here. And now the model is generating a response. Okay, so we have a response from the model. It's a very lengthy response. And obviously, what we can do here is we can ask the model to shorten it. But we're not going to do that. That's something that you can try on your own. It provides a title here, or like a heading, meta prompting versus fuchsia prompting, structure, application, and effectiveness. Quite comprehensive in the response. And this is something that you have to kind of get used to with these language models. They tend to be very verbose. They, by default, want to generate very long responses. So it's your job to be able to know how to prompt these models to give you shorter responses, more concise. If that's what you want, then you have to prompt the model to do that. But we haven't really asked the model to do that yet. Okay, so here's the breakdown. And it basically tells me this is the structure. So meta prompting is like this. It gives me a definition of it. And then it has all these citations as well. We'll go through that later. Then it has the application of it, application of it will help me better understand it. And notice that for each of these sections, it does have a bit about few-shot prompting, and that should help me differentiate between these two concepts or these two prompting techniques. Or that's the idea, I believe. So it says the sources highlight that meta prompting emphasizes on structure and syntax, makes it well suited for interacting with symbolic systems and code environments, which are crucial for complex reasoning tasks. So let's go through one of the citations here. I'm going to pick this last one here since I already read this out. And if you hover over it, it gives you an explanation, but you really cannot tell where and in which part of the paper this is. So to get a better sense of that, you can click on the citation itself, and then it will take you directly where that is located in the paper. So this is how the paper has been extracted from the PDF. So you see the actual text where this particular statement was pulled from. So that's really nice to be able to know the source of truth, because that's how you verify whether this is a correct statement or if the model is just making it up. But one thing about NotebookLM that I've noticed from my own experimentation is that it's usually not hallucinating, and usually because it's forced to use citation, it almost always gives you correct statements or truthful statements. And I really like the citation feature because of that. You can always validate that. And that's how you would use the citation feature. And what I can do here now, as I continue doing this research, I can actually save this as a note. So I'm going to save to note right here. And you can see that now it's saved as a note. I can actually go here and change the name of it. Again, ideally, this should be done by the LLM, or can be done by the LLM, can be automated. But for now, we have to do this manually. So I will say meta prompting versus few-shot prompting. Here we go. So that's our little note right there, which is a saved response note. Notice that it's different from our note that we write manually. And one thing you'll note about these saved response notes is that they only show you 10 citations, right? So you only get 10. But in reality, this whole note has up to 11 citations here. You will see that this one has 11 citations. So the notes shows 10. So that's just something to keep in mind, that you don't see all the citations, you only see up to 10. So 10 is the limit there from what you see in the note preview. But here, when you go into the chat, you see the full list of citations. Something that you can also do is you can go to the actual document here or the research paper. If you are reading through this, you can also save those as notes. So this is typically how you would save notes if you're like reading a book or something like that. So let's say I wanted to actually save the abstract as a note, as an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this entire abstract. I think it finishes right here. And then notice that some suggestions are mentioned here. And one of those suggestions is to add to note. So the selected text will be added as a note. That's another way to create a note. That's really cool, because sometimes maybe you are reading through this and you found something interesting and you want to make a note of it. This is a very cool feature for that. So instead of like pasting things around and manually creating the note, you can just basically hit this button right here. So let's do that, add to note. And you will see that it was quickly added here as part of my notes. So it says code from meta prompting. In fact, I'm going to change that and I'm just going to say abstract. So now it's explicit that this is the abstract. And this is how I continue to analyze the paper and try to understand the paper better. One thing I also do with any paper that I'm reading is I would like to know what the contributions are. And apparently there are some contributions here, but this is a very lengthy contribution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select it. And then what I can do is I can summarize to notes. This is actually another very useful feature. Something that you can also do while you read the paper, if there's something that's very difficult to understand, you can also use this option here, help me understand. So I'm just going to summarize the contributions and see what the model gives me. So here it's generating a note automatically. So I can open the note and you will see that now it has nicely formatted into bullet points. And it says here are the main takeaways of the passage condensed into bullet points. So it introduces meta prompting first, then it has a theoretical foundation, and then it talks about recursive meta prompting, then it has an experimental validation, and then it has like zero-shot performance, and you can see the performance there. So it's not explicit here that these are contributions. It seems to me this is more like the takeaways from the research paper. And you must understand that if you're not really prompting them all explicitly to give you contributions, then it will give you, or it will take a guess on what you want just based on the selection. So yeah, so maybe it did not really do a good job at the contributions. So one thing I can do now is I can be more specific to the model. So I go to the chat part and I can do that explicitly. This is where the chat actually comes into play. I can go to the chat window here. I know this is selected because by default it's going to be selected. And then I can ask it, what are the contributions of the paper? And in fact, I'm going to say, what are the main contributions of the paper? It could be a lot of contributions, but what are the main ones? And then I'm just going to ask it. And you can see here now it gets into all the details, right? It generates, here are the main contributions of the paper based on the information provided in the sources. The authors propose meta prompting, then it says theoretical framework, then it says distinction from few-shot prompting. There is a lot of comparison with few-shot prompting, apparently. And then meta prompting for prompting tasks and recursive meta prompting as well. So there is another version called recursive meta prompting. And then there is empirical validation of the meta prompting effectiveness. So that was part of the contribution. And then expanding meta prompting to multimodal foundational models as well. So that's also part of the contribution. And again, you can also go back to the citations and you will get the citations for where this particular thing was mentioned. So I can go here, and here is where it was mentioned, and I can go to a deeper reading on why this was considered a contribution. So that's how you would typically work on this. And again, what I can do here is I can save this to Note. So this will be main contributions. Main contributions. Okay, so that's saved. Now this one, again, wasn't that useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it, and I can also delete notes. So I'm just going to delete this one. So this is how you experiment with NotebookLM. Maybe adding notes with the suggested prompts wasn't enough. And in that case, I used the chat functionality to generate something more precise. So you have to experiment to see what works best for the data that you are making available to NotebookLM. As a researcher, something that's very common practice if you are from a research lab is that you need to present papers. That's something that you have to get familiar with. So something that you can do here in NotebookLM is you can ask it to summarize something into like a slide. Why not? Let's try that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these notes, and then it gives me a bunch of suggestions here. But I don't want any of these suggestions. What I want is I want to actually generate a slide from the content that are in these notes. So I can use the chat functionality for that. Notice that it's saying it has selected 3 notes, and it's going to use those 3 notes specifically to generate the slide that I want. So I'm going to say create one short slide for the concepts mentioned in the notes. Let's see if it follows exactly what I want here. So it says create one short slide for the concepts mentioned in the notes. So this is about those notes. So I just want to create a slideshow, and this is going to be my first slide. Again, these models tend to always want to generate something very long. So you can see again here that even though I'm saying one short slide, it's basically trying to create a slide, yes, because I can see it's formatting things really nicely, but this would be too heavy for a slide. Although I really like how it's summarizing things, it's distinguishing between the few-shot prompting, it's talking about applications. Overall, the structure is really nice, and it's also talking about how effective meta prompting is for complex reasoning. That's kind of where you want to use this. But I think this is too long for a presentation. So what I can do is I can save it to notes, then I can name this. So I'll just call it notes first line. And then what I can do is I can deselect all and then just select this one and then ask it to just summarize that. Maybe it generated a very long response because I gave it too many sources. That could also be the case. But in general, I would say with models like Gemini, they tend to always want to produce very long text. That's something you have to know and something you have to kind of work around and be able to prompt the model better or guide the model better. And that's what we're trying to do here. So I'm going to use this note. You can see that one note is selected. And then I'm going to prompt it again to create a shorter version of this. Create a shorter version of this slide, maximum 3 paragraphs. If I'm more specific, obviously it will help the model. So I'm testing again if I can get a shorter version of that. So I'm iterating, right? And that's kind of a process that you have to get comfortable with when you work with these LLMs. And here you go. this is a much shorter version, and I can get shorter versions of this. I can tell it, just give me 3 sentences or something like that. And so that's how you kind of experiment with NotebookLM and the model and the chat window and the note. Once I'm happy with the results here and happy with my notes, I'm very excited about what I have found. And I could also create my own notes and so on. I could also share this with my lab mates. My lab mates might also be interested in this approach. So if I'm in a research lab, I could also share this with my advisor. I could share this with my research lab mates, and they also get to see what meta prompting is about and learn very quickly what it's about, because I've also already done the work together with NotebookLM. So there is a feature here called Share. So you can click on Share, and this shares basically the notebook. You can select who you want to share with right here. So for instance, I have multiple accounts. I'm sharing it with myself, and you can assign different roles. So you can assign viewer if you only want people to view the notebook and don't change anything, or you can also revoke the access if that's something that you want to do, or you can also set them as an editor. And if you set them as an editor, they will be able to change, add notes and things like that to the notebook. So I'm just going to select viewer, and I'm going to send. I can also just copy the link as well, but viewer is the default role. I can then hit send here, and that will be sent to whoever you added that you wanted to share this notebook with. So that's it for this section. Hopefully you learn a few things on how to take advantage of the notes, how to use the chat feature, how to upload PDF files, and how to interact with the PDF files, taking advantage of the citations to verify the information that the model is producing as well. That's really important when working with LLMs. And I think that's one of the powerful features that I really like about NotebookLM, because you can always verify answers and the model tends to hallucinate less. Stay tuned for upcoming sections to see more interesting use cases